Hello, YouTubers and NFL fans everywhere. This is Matt, the NFL Fanatic, giving you my Week 14 2024 NFL predictions. Well, I hope everyone had that celebrated Thanksgiving a tremendous and fruitful Thanksgiving with your family and your friends and all the people that you care near and dear about. I definitely had a great time with my family, just enjoying a nice meal. And to be fair, for the games on Thanksgiving Day, they were all fairly good. They were all fairly good to a point, and I was impressed. Of course, the main thing everybody's gonna talk about is the Bears-Lions game, which shout out to ATS Picks, job well done, buddy. First time for the Lions in franchise history to get to 11-1, and you would think the Lions could rest on their laurels, but they can't because the Minnesota Vikings and the Philadelphia Eagles are right behind them on 8 and 5 game winning streaks, respectively. And I believe the Vikings play the Lions at the end of the year. That game could be huge because that could be for the NFC North, which probably will be the Sunday night game if the NFL correctly or smartly makes the schedule on the last weekend. But of course, what everybody's going to talk about is the last 36 seconds in which Matt Eberflus cost his coaching career by literally seeing Caleb Williams get sacked and then decide not to call a timeout and let the clock run out to where the only play that they had left was a Hail Mary throw to Rome Odunze, who couldn't catch it, and that ended Matt Eberflus' career. And for the first time in franchise history, the Bears had fired a head coach in the middle of the season, meaning that the New Orleans Saints with Dennis Allen, the Chicago Bears with Matt Eberflus, and the New York Jets of Robert Saleh. The Jets have also fired Joe Douglas, their general manager. We have 3 in-season firings for Accountability Monday, or Black Monday. I like calling it Accountability Monday. A little bit more of an appropriate term there. Accountability Monday, for those people. Of course, I guess genuinely for Matt Eberflus, it was a Black Friday, literally for the holiday and for his head coaching career. But that was a shocker. The Cowboys-Giants game, let's just say, that was a competitive game. It was a competitive division game. Drew Lock played admirably, but essentially the pick six he threw to Overshawn was the difference in the game. Cooper Rush didn't play bad. I think the Cowboys have a little bit of hope. But, it just goes to show you that it's not very great to be in a situation in Dallas to where you're bragging about a win over the worst team in the NFC and the second worst team or the third worst team in the NFL in terms of draft order. But good for them. And then of course the Packers and Dolphins on Thanksgiving. The Dolphins can't play in the cold. They're just too comfortable in the South Beach weather. They just cannot play when it gets cold. Tua is about a mediocre quarterback if you get him under 50 degrees. And it's kind of shocking, but I guess for a Hawaiian kid going out in the cold, he hasn't had to do it that often, and getting to Miami, it's very fortunate that he can go from a tropical climate out in Hawaii to a tropical climate down in South Florida, for the most part. And then, a lot of the other games, the Bills routing the Niners in the Snow Bowl Part 2, 2 weeks in a row in Cleveland and Buffalo. Great Lake effect areas from snow. Just an absolute thrashing of the Niners, who lost Christian McCaffrey and Jordan Mason, their number 1 and 2 running backs, to injuries. Christian McCaffrey is now out for 6 weeks, so he is done for the year. And for Mason, it's just been a tough year for him. Jordan Mason actually had a very good year in terms of running the football. He's been admirable in McCaffrey's backup role. But it just seems like that the Niners are destined to not make the playoffs, and they are at a significant crossroads in their franchise, because I feel like their window has been closed for the Super Bowl. The last 3 years to make the Super Bowl, out of the last 5 years to make the Super Bowl 2 times in the last 5 years. You could have made it arguably, 4 times in 5 years if Jaquiski Tartt doesn't drop an interception in the NFC Championship game in 2021, and if Brock Purdy doesn't get his shoulder blown up in 2022. You could have maybe made, 4 Super Bowls, but you only had 2 bites at the apple. You lost to the current dynasty and the Chiefs in crushing ways. And with all the injuries that have piled up to Nick Bosa, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle's been hurt, McCaffrey, Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, Brock Purdy, their quarterback, Tua Funga has been hurt. Fred Warner's been playing a fractured ankle. It just feels like with the Niners, it was just a cursed season. You could argue from the Madden curse because McCaffrey was on the cover of Madden this year. That this Niners team is at a significant crossroads. I will be brutally honest. I always tend to be. I would fire Kyle Shanahan. I have not been a Kyle Shanahan fan throughout my through watching him. I don't think he's that great of a coach. I could make the argument that if Aubrey Thomas doesn't get the Week 17 2021 interception that gets the Niners into the playoffs, he would have missed the playoffs 4 of his first 5 seasons, and that to me would have been a fireable offense. But I can't change, context, and I hate being a contextual person. But yeah, so I think I would fire Kyle Shanahan. I know he would get work immediately. I just don't think it's as successful as people think. And I know they're going to blame the injuries, but now, you could argue in 2020 they blamed injuries. 2018 you blamed injuries, and in just close games, he cannot win close games. That's just a obvious thing. If they can't score at least like 27 or more points, he's not very good in low-scoring games. And I would move on, but I don't think they will. And then you have to basically reset the meter from that moving on. So, and then just some of the other quick little tidbits. Texans, Jags, kind of an odd back and forth game. Joe Mixon had a nice big run that won him the game. But obviously the big story, though, was Trevor Lawrence getting concussed by Aziz Al-Shaair, the Texans linebacker, has had a history of dirty hits throughout his career. I do not think that he I think you can have this kind of thought. I think Al-Shaair is a dirty player. I don't think he has malicious intent to, injure people. But to be fair, I heard D'Amico after the game. I am not going in the D'Amico route of this wasn't, that hit was not the Damar Hamlin Tua incident where Damar Hamlin, I thought, just made a clean tackle. Like, Al-Shaair definitely launched himself into Lawrence, which gave him a concussion. And to say, well, Trevor Lawrence needs to slide better, I'm like, well, again, Al-Shaair didn't need to launch in that way, and he probably will be suspended. I don't think it matters for the Texans in the grand scheme of things, because I do believe the Texans will be able to win the South handily. But, obviously, best of wishes to William Trevor Lawrence for a quick and speedy recovery. I would shut him down for the year, but for me, I don't know if, Doug said he's going to be fine. Though I will say this, and I'm not trying to be the ultimate hater, but let's look at William Lawrence in a significant way. I think there are, even with the injuries to his shoulder and the concussion, and he's had 2 concussions now in back-to-back years. I would make the argument that William Lawrence has a significant amount of questions of, did the Jacksonville Jaguars make a massive mistake? Because even through, minus those injuries, he was having a mediocre to below average year with the talent around him in key moments. And I think the Jags have a serious question of whoever gets that job is not nearly as appealing, because I do not think William Lawrence has earned the right or has given the franchise hope in being a franchise quarterback. And I'll talk about some of the other games too as I go through my picks. But before I get into that, let me tell you how I did last week. Last week I had a sensational week. Last week I had probably the second best week of this year besides the 16-0 week. But against the spread, I went 11-5 against the spread. Thank you, Jameis Winston, for throwing 2 pick sixes and doing the full Jameis in terms of throwing for 500 yards and 4 touchdowns, but also 3 interceptions that cost you a game, including 2 pick sixes that helped me get the 5.5 point cover over. Thank you, Jameis. But I went 11-5 against the spread, and straight up I went 15-1. Those dang Colts, man. You let the Anthony Richardson bum lead a game-winning drive, and no offense to Colts fans, you can yell at me. I wasn't impressed. I honestly think that if you look at the New England game, Drake May was a significantly better quarterback, and the Colts just, kudos for him getting the game-winning drive, but that guy is not an NFL quarterback. You can't complete half your passes and have that TD interception ratio and expect to have long-term success. I'm sorry. But maybe I'm a bit salty because I could have been 16-0, but that's how I got to 15-1 straight up, so that equals 68.8% against the spread and 94% straight up, or 93.8 if you round it up, 94% straight up. And now overall for the year, through 195 games, I am against the spread 104, 86, and 5. Which equals 54.6% against the spread. And straight up now, I am 136 and 59, which equals 69.7%. So by far, one of the best years I've ever had. Probably the best year total I've had in predicting games, both on the betting lines and straight up. I am thrilled with these numbers. I hope I can continue to grow them. This is going to be the last shortened week before we have the 64 game final stretch, which I'm excited for. But, for me, I just hope, I hope I can just continue to ramp up the straight up, the against the spreads, I don't know, and I will tell you this week, this is a hedge week, and I will explain for my picks, but, this is going to be, a real fun, final 77 game stretch here for the regular season, so we'll see how it goes. But again, this is the last week of the bye season. This is the other big 16 bye week for the Baltimore Ravens, Denver Broncos, Houston Texans, Indianapolis Colts, New England Patriots, and Washington Commanders all have byes this week. So you have Lamar, Derrick Henry, Justin Tucker, who's having the worst year of his career, Bo Nix, the Broncos defense, Javonte Williams, Cortland Sutton, C.J. Stroud, Joe Mixon, Nico Collins, Texans defense, Kyrie Fairbairn, Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Downs, Michael Pittman, Matt Gay, Drake May, Ramondre Stevenson, Kendrick Bourne, Kayshon Boutte, the Pats defense, Joey Sly, Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin, Ryan Robinson, Zach Ertz, De'Ami Brown, the Commanders defense, Zane Gonzalez, because Cybert's on the IR. If you have any of those players on your fantasy teams, bench them because they will not be playing this weekend. Alright, so time for my picks for this week. So, on Thursday, in the game for the NFC North, when the 9-3 Green Bay Packers travel to Detroit to take on the 11-1 Detroit Lions, the Detroit Lions are 3.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Detroit here, minus 3.5, and Detroit straight up. Then the next game, in the battle for the number 1 pick slot, when the 2-10 Jacksonville Jaguars travel to Tennessee to take on the 3-9 Tennessee Titans. This game is so bad, this game seems so evenly matched to me with everything that's going on, with the circumstance. I'm going to take the hedge here. I'm going to take Tennessee here straight up, but I'm going to take Jacksonville here plus 3.5. Hopefully I can get that cover. That hook is kind of an odd number, but I'm going to take Tennessee here straight up, but Jacksonville plus 3.5. Then the next game, when the 3-9 New York Jets travel to Miami to take on the 5-7 Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins are 6.5-point favorites in this game. I am going to take here another hedge. This is one I feel confident that Miami will win. But I just think the Jets, they'll kind of hang around. And after what I've seen out of the Dolphins, I don't know if they can cover 6.5. I will take Miami here straight up, but the New York Jets plus 6.5. Then the next game, when the 6-6 Atlanta Falcons travel to the 10-2 Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings are 5-point favorites in this game. Give me Minnesota here, minus 5, and Minnesota straight up. Then the next game, when the 4-8 New Orleans Saints travel to New York to take on the 2-10 New York Giants. The New Orleans Saints are 5-point favorites in this game. Give me the New Orleans Saints here, minus 5, and New Orleans Saints straight up. Then the next game, when the 10-2 Philadelphia Eagles travel to Carolina to take on the 3-9 Carolina Panthers. The Philadelphia Eagles are 12.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Philadelphia here, minus 12.5, and Philadelphia straight up. I know that's a lot of points, but usually in these big spreads most of the year, I feel confident the team's going to roll. The Lions have had a couple of these big spreads. The Chiefs had a big spread, but I think how the Chiefs played, that was too big of a number to take. With the Eagles and the Panthers, of how big the talent gap is, I have confidence the Eagles can cover at least by 13, but we'll see. Because the Panthers have played fairly well over the last few weeks. But again, I have Philadelphia minus 12.5 and Philadelphia straight up. The next game, in the other AFC North rival game, when the 3-8 Cleveland Browns travel to Pittsburgh to take on the 9-3 Pittsburgh Steelers. The Pittsburgh Steelers are 6.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Pittsburgh here, minus 6.5, and Pittsburgh straight up. Then the next game, when the 2-10 Las Vegas Raiders travel to Tampa Bay to take on the 6-6 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are 7-point favorites in this game. Give me Tampa Bay here, minus 7, and Tampa Bay straight up. Then the next game, when the 7-5 Seattle Seahawks travel to Arizona to take on the 6-6 Arizona Cardinals. The Arizona Cardinals are 2.5-point favorites in this game, in one of my 2 outright upsets of the weekend. Give me Seattle here, plus 2.5, and Seattle straight up. Then the next game, when the 10-2 Buffalo Bills travel to Los Angeles, take on the 6-6 Los Angeles Rams. The Buffalo Bills are 4.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Buffalo here -4.5, and Buffalo straight up. Then the next game, when the 4-8 Chicago Bears travel to San Francisco to take on the 5-7 San Francisco 49ers. The San Francisco 49ers are 4-point favorites in this game. In my biggest upset of the weekend, give me Chicago here +4, and Chicago straight up. Then the next game, in the Sunday night game, when the 8-4 Los Angeles Chargers travel to Kansas City to take on the 11-1 Kansas City Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs are 4-point favorites in this game. Give me the Kansas City Chiefs here straight up, but I'm going to take the Los Angeles Chargers +4. Then the next game, finally in the Monday night game, in the Simpsons, ESPN Plus, and Disney Plus exclusive game, when the 4-8 Cincinnati Bengals travel to Dallas to take on the 5-7 Dallas Cowboys. The Cincinnati Bengals are 5.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Cincinnati here -5.5, and Cincinnati straight up. All right, it's time for my quick thoughts on each game. The Detroit Lions over the Green Bay Packers. This is a game when you look at the Packers and the Lions. This was a competitive game for the most part about 4 or 5 weeks ago in Lambeau. Essentially, the Jordan Love pick six changed the game. And overall, I do have to say, and Jordan Love has been hurt. I think that when you look at this game, I just have confidence that even though the Lions, I think the one tough thing that you can take from the Lions game on Thanksgiving was they got ravaged by injuries. They lost one of their, I believe, Chris Rodriguez, or one of their better linebackers, to a torn ACL. Malcolm Rodriguez. I'm sorry, Malcolm Rodriguez. Chris Rodriguez, I believe, is a running back for the Washington Commanders. Malcolm Rodriguez tore his ACL. He's been one of their more effective package linebackers. But the Lions, I feel, in this spot, they both had a week of rest. And again, Jordan Love and the Packers. Josh Jacobs, quietly, I believe, has been the third best running back in the NFL all year. And they've had one of the best, I believe they have one of the best rushing attacks in the NFL overall, which has been very impressive. And Jeff Halfrey, the former Boston College head coach, has done a fantastic job on defense, because the Packers have been one of the best turnover causing defenses. They've been really effective against the run for the majority of the year, and he's done a fantastic job. And I think, again, Packers-Lions, this divisional game, remember last year, this was the big game last year, right around on Thanksgiving last year. So about almost a year to the day that the Packers played the Lions in Detroit, and the Packers won that game, and essentially you could argue that started the Jordan Love ascent to what we have now. But when I look at these two teams, I think the Lions, they grind better, they have better offensive weapons, and I just think with Jordan Love and this environment, knowing that the Eagles are riding their tail, I just feel like the Lions, they remember what happened last year. I think they'll be able to pound it really well with Sonic and Knuckles and Montgomery and Gibbs. Jameson Williams has been able to make some very big, nice splash plays on reverses and deep balls, which again has really helped open their offense. I think Sam Laporta should have a solid game. And I just think, again, the Lions and Packers, if you're going into this type of game, the Lions have just been consistently better. I think Ben Johnson should be able to make more plays on the Jeff Halfrey defense, and I think Halfrey will be able to stop the Ben Johnson offense. And I think the Lions, just of how they've shown to be, Jordan Love has not been turnover prone the last couple games. That hasn't been in his nature. I think he throws at least one interception in this game. And I feel like in this kind of game, that'll be the difference. And I think the Lions, with their home crowd and the confidence of this is the best team the Lions have ever had in a regular season, that will lift them up to a huge, probably knocking the Packers out of the division race game for them. And it's essentially going to come down to if the Vikings can keep winning up to the point of that Week 18 game against the Lions for the NFC North, which is going to be a massive game, which should be the Sunday night game in Detroit, in my opinion. But that's why I like Detroit here -3.5, and Detroit straight up. The next game, the Tennessee Titans over the Jacksonville Jaguars. This game to me comes down to, it's not a great game. This is what I would call a cruddy toss-up. Like, both these teams aren't great. Jacksonville, Mac Jones playing bad. Even though he had an admirable game on Sunday. He was 20 of 25, 2 touchdowns. Helped screw me out of a 5-point cover with the Texans. But good for you, Mac. But to me, when I look at the Jags and Titans, like, it just comes down to, I feel like the Titans have just been a bit better as of late, and Will Levis, for the most part, at least over the last 4 or 5 weeks, has been playing better football. I think one hidden story for them has been their defense. The Titans' defense has actually been very good this year. Underratedly, like, they have been the number 2 defense in yards. They have the number 1 passing defense in yards. And so, yeah, they have the number 1 passing defense, and they have the number 2 total defense in yards. Their run defense is about average, but, like, the Titans' defense has actually played pretty well. And Will Levis, for the most part, has kind of played more competent football over, like, the last, like, several games, minus the Commander game where their defense got shredded. And it just, like, to me, like, if I'm looking at what the Titans have, I'm looking at what the Jags, the Titans have more weapons. I think also one thing I had to shout the Titans for is the hidden season of Nick Westbrook-Akina, who this year has, 8 touchdowns. You wouldn't think Nick Westbrook-Akina would, with his 365 yards. He's caught out of his 20 receptions, nearly 50% of them have been touchdowns, and he has the longest reception of the year with a 98-yard touchdown against the Vikings a couple weeks ago. Kind of so a little bit of a hidden respect season for Nick Westbrook-Akina, and I just feel like with the Titans, they're at home. And even though I think Mac Jones has been a better quarterback there in his career than Will Levis has, I think the Titans have more talent and have a little bit more to go to. And you can argue for the Jags is a good thing. They're out of the playoffs. Doug's getting fired. Trent Baalke's probably going to get fired. And I would probably want to have the draft pick. He's getting the number 1 draft pick this year, with Shador or Travis Hunter for them. Like, they could trade that and get a lot of, because I think the Jags need a lot of assets to help build around that team. So I think, but could the Jags win it? Sure. I'm going to take the Titans here. Better defense, better talent around them offensively. And I think Will Levis has been playing a little bit better than Mac Jones throughout the year. And I just think the Titans hold on and win this game. So that's why I like Tennessee here straight up. But again, this game is so fluky and cruddy toss-up that it's I'm going to take the Jags here plus 3.5 just to save my hedge here just in case they win. So sorry for the spread pick, but that's what I'm going to go with. That's all I like Tennessee here straight up, but Jacksonville plus 3.5. The next game, the Miami Dolphins over the New York Jets. This game to me comes down to where I think the Jets, they said an amazing stat about the Jets. They're the first team in NFL history to be favorited in, I believe, 12 of their games this year on the betting lines. And they are 3-9 on the betting lines with that favor. So that tells you how underperforming the Jets have been the entire year. Like, you can genuinely say, for the expectation this Jets team had, and look, I wasn't an absolute nut. I didn't think, oh, the Jets are making the Super Bowl. I never thought the Jets were a Super Bowl team with Aaron Rodgers. I didn't think that was possible. But I thought again, and this was one of my worst takes of the year, I thought that they were they were going to win the division and at least get into the playoffs and maybe win a playoff game, which for the Jets standards, that'd be massive. But it's just been mistake after mistake. They really couldn't effectively offensively. They only could score 7 points through about 3 quarters of football. Because remember, they had basically a kick return touchdown, and then essentially the other drive was based off a fumble from the Seahawks. So, the offense really didn't have to do that much. But again, Aaron Rodgers, and, for this year of Aaron Rodgers fashion, he threw a horrible pick 6 to Leonard Williams, who ran it 90-plus yards back for the big man. Good for him. 2nd career interception, and who knew the big man could run like that? I didn't think so, but, kudos to him. And again, the Jets, in another heartbreaking fashion at home, lost a game that, if any Jets fans had any hope, that it's all out of it now. And now, when you look at this matchup, the Dolphins, who have played fairly better in several weeks, they're playing a weaker level of competition. Also, Mike McDaniel likes to beat up a lot of losing teams. He's only lost 1 game over the last couple of years with the Dolphins against a losing franchise. A losing team that year. And, I think the Dolphins, they have the offense enough, too. It did throw for about 365 and a couple touchdowns. They can run the ball really well. And I just trust Mike McDaniel against this very bad Jets defense, or that even if the Jets can, if Rodgers can move the ball, I just think the Dolphins will, grind out a win, a game of this kind of caliber. But to be fair, in division games with spreads like this. You know, I took the Bills one time that I thought they could cover. They could cover a spread against the Bills, and I was wrong. They couldn't. And I think with this Dolphins team, it feels very similar. That, you know, again, I think the Dolphins should win their home. They have a better defense. They just have better talent and been playing better on a consistent basis. And also, I just feel like you could just bet on the Jets that even if they're going to be competitive in the game, they're going to find a way to lose the game. They've done it every week, essentially, this year. Like the Colts game where nobody thought they would win. Oh, they blew that one. They blew the Colts game. They blew the Bills game. They blew the Patriots game. They could blow this one. They blew the Seahawks game in a way. They gave up the touchdown with 5 minutes to go. But yeah, with just the current pattern, like, I'll give the Jets their credit, and I haven't been impressed with Miami enough that, you know, I think that the Jets could hang around and compete within a score. Unless the Dolphins just completely, you know, stifle their run and Rodgers can't get anything going offensively. I don't think that will happen, but we'll see. But I'm taking the Dolphins here. Just they played better. They've been playing better defensively, and Tua's just been playing at a much higher level this year compared to Rodgers. Even though Rodgers does have a 19-8 TD interception ratio, so. But I think it's gonna be a good bad game. I just think in this situation, go with the team that's been a little bit hotter and more consistent, and that's the Dolphins. So. That's like the Dolphins here straight up, the New York Jets plus 6.5. The next game, the Minnesota Vikings over the Atlanta Falcons. This is fairly easy. The Minnesota Vikings, cardiac cats again. Great showing by the defense through the through the fourth quarter. I thought, you know, they did a tremendous job. They were down 12 points. It was the largest comeback they had since the 33-0 game against the Colts a couple years ago. Sam Darnold was admirable. He threw for 231 yards and a couple touchdowns. But the Vikings defense, when they had to have moments, they came up with huge turnovers and interceptions that won them the game, though I feel for Kyler Murray, who's not that good. And I think the Cardinals are realizing, like, he's had his moments, and you could look at all those advanced idiotic stats. All you advanced analytic nerds can say, Kyler Murray has the best QBR in the league. Yeah, I don't care about that. He cost them the game by throwing a horrible pick to his former teammate and intentionally grounding the ball, which cost them the game because they get the touchdown there, they win the game. But then they had to kick the field goal to go up from 3-6, and the Vikings were able to drive down the field the rest of the way to win the game by a point at the end. Also, shout out to John Parker Romo. He did finally miss a field goal, but he did make a big 50-plus yard field goal to get them to a 9-9 tie, which was huge in a one-point game. So, shout out to John Parker Romo. A good Romo that can't choke, and hopefully every non-Cowboy fan appreciates that little joke there. But I digress. But speaking of choking, actually, that's a fun segue to Mr. Kirk Cousins. Boy, as someone that took the Bucs to win the NFC South, boy, am I glad to see that Kirk Cousins is still Kirk Cousins. Because, my gosh, Atlanta fans, shout out to Hatbox, a YouTube prognosticator. I am sorry for you, buddy. You spent $180 million and $100 million in guaranteed to get an aging quarterback off an Achilles that just seems to not have, besides his arm, an ability to go through pressure. 4 picks? And they were all horrible picks. The one to the rookie, even though the rookie picked them off twice, that was god-awful. That was a 4th and 5. I would have punted the ball. They were up at that point. And Koo, look, and as a, as a fellow Asian for Young-Ho Koo, I appreciate that he's, been good, but the thing about his kicking, it's weird. It's like, he doesn't really, move his leg in a traditional kicking motion. And I know, anybody that wants to troll me, I know, Tucker's been worse than Koo. I get it. But watching him kick at times, it's frustrating. Because there are moments when he, made that 58-yarder to beat the Saints complete when I didn't need him to. But then the next week, he, misses 2 or 3. I'm like, why couldn't you have done that, last week when I needed you to miss? But I digress. But, this game, it's where you're playing a Vikings defense that has been absolutely outstanding. The Vikings have been consistent at home. And I just feel like the Falcons are in a freefall. They were 6-2 going into a game, or 6-3 going into a game against New Orleans, where they were competitive back and forth. They choked that game. Then the next week, they go into Denver and get rolled by the Broncos, 38-6 in a game that people maybe weren't surprised that Denver won. They were just surprised by the margin of how they won. And then they have their bye, and they come off their bye. Their defense has one of their better games of the entire year, and Kirk Cousins literally chokes the game away with 4 horrendous turnovers. And again, I feel like, with the Vikings, as Sam Darnold, been lighting the world on fire? No. And, Aaron Jones played solid. They have it just, Hawkinson's been making contributions. He's slowly getting more integrated in the offense. They have Addison. I just think the Vikings have better talent. Receiver position, much better defensive talent, though Stephon Gilmore does have a hamstring injury, which will be something to monitor. But, in this kind of game, when you're looking at two teams, the Vikings are on a 5-game win streak. The Falcons on a 3-game losing streak. The Vikings have been more consistent on defense, offense, and coaching. And I think all those factors together kind of mend itself into getting a win for the Minnesota Vikings to get their 6th straight win to get to 11-2 to keep the Detroit Lions on their heels for the NFC North. So, but that's all I like Minnesota here, -5, Minnesota straight up. The next game, New Orleans Saints over the New York Giants. This is fairly easy. Take the Saints here. The Giants have been an absolute disaster. Tommy DeVito was hurt. Drew Lock couldn't play that much better. They're the worst team in the league. Dexter Lawrence and Dio Johnson, their rookie tight end, and their defensive tackle are now out for the year, essentially. And I think that's going to help with Alvin Kamara with the running game. And I do have to say this. Darren Rizzi, the Saints coach, it hasn't been great, and I don't think that he'll get the head coaching job. But, I've watched the Saints over the last few weeks, and, they're a more competent team. They played fundamentally well. Blake Grupe missed a, 36-yard field goal. Also, I think that's one key thing, too, that people need to talk about. The year of bad kicking has just been surprising to me as ever. Just how bad the kicking's been. But I digress. But, when you look at the Saints here, Kamara will do incredibly well. I think Derek Carr should have a fundamentally solid game. Shout out, though, to Taysom Hill. The Swiss Army knife for the New Orleans Saints tore his ACL. He is now out for the rest of the season. His Saints career might actually be done. And if it is the case, one of the greatest utility players in the history of the league, just because Sean Payton was the only guy that saw a 30-year-old quarterback and thought, okay, we could make this kid one of the most unique weapons in terms of he does special teams coverage, he can throw, he can run, he can catch, and kudos, again, I think Dennis Allen, you should have maybe let him throw a little bit more, because I didn't think he was actually as bad a quarterback as people, gave him credit for. And obviously Dennis Allen didn't know how to use him as quarterback. But in that regard, I just think with the Saints, they have better defense, and the Giants just don't have that much talent. The Giants are just kind of fundamentally accepting that they're probably going to be the worst team in the NFC. And I just think the Saints, they've just been playing better. They have better offensive talent. They have Marquez Valdez-Scantling has scored 3 touchdowns in the last 3 games. He's become their big deep threat, or he's become the deep threat that Aaron Rodgers used in Green Bay, which is surprising. But I'm taking the Saints here. But a little bit more camaraderie, better defense, a bit healthier, and just a better morale to go into the Giants to just keep continuing the Giants on their horrendous losing streak, on their path to the number 1 pick. So that's why New Orleans here -5 and New Orleans straight up. The next game, the Philadelphia Eagles over the Carolina Panthers. This one, look, the Philadelphia Eagles, best team in the NFL. You could argue. Best team in the NFC easily. They have been on a roll. The Eagles defense have played the top 4 offenses in the Commanders, the Ravens, the Bengals. I forget the other one, but they've all held them to under 20 points, which is incredibly impressive. The secondary has been sensational. Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean have been tremendous in the secondary. They've really boosted that secondary up. Darius Slay has been able to miss the last 2 games with concussion. Saquon Barkley is the MVP in my opinion. He has basically lifted this offense with his legs. He is on pace to break Eric Dickerson's single-season rushing record. And Jalen, Jalen's had a good fundamental year. I think the biggest question you can have about the Eagles is Jalen Hurts' passing ability, which is a fair question. Because again, he only threw for 118 yards on Sunday. He only threw for 119 yards. So again, his air contributions are not great. But I do think for the Philadelphia Eagles here, you could argue this could maybe be a trap in terms of a spread pick, because Carolina Panthers for the last 4 weeks have played better football. And I believe they're 4-0 against the spread, because I think they had a 10-point spread against the Chiefs that they covered, and they had a 6-point spread against Tampa. So the Panthers are 4-0 against the spread. And they've played better football. This is probably the best stretch of football I've seen Bryce Young play. I don't think he needs to win a game in order for me not to think about taking a quarterback. I don't think they win this one. But this is where I think the Eagles, if they can handle their business, coming off the high of beating a very good AFC team in the Ravens. I think the Eagles will probably earn the 1 seed. If you believe next week that the Bills beat the Lions in the biggest game, probably the second biggest game of the year, and definitely probably the biggest interconference game of the year. I think that is an actual Super Bowl preview, unlike the Eagles and Ravens, because I never thought the Ravens were going to be in that conversation, but I digress. But, in this game, when you just look at the rosters, look at the talent, the Eagles defense should make Bryce Young have a very tough day. That offensive line is going to get wrecked by Jalen Carter and Milton Williams and Jordan Davis. I think that and Nolan Smith, that pass rush will get through the Panthers' offensive line. Bryce doesn't have the athleticism or ability to escape and make some of the plays that Lamar Jackson did. And I think the Eagles comfortably win. Again, in the first quarter, that's where usually you can get the Eagles because they're one of the slower first quarter teams. They only scored 2 touchdowns in the first quarter of the entire year. And again, the key thing with the Eagles is you have to limit the run and get them out of 4th and 1s, because if they get to 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1, they will go for the shove and not think twice about it. But I think the Eagles, this seems like a Jags-Lions, Titans-Lions type game, to where the talent gap is so significant and the play is so significant that I think the Eagles can cover this 13-point spread and get a win and a runaway. So that's like Philadelphia here, minus 12.5, and Philadelphia straight up. The next game, the Pittsburgh Steelers over the Cleveland Browns. This one to me, it's fairly easy. The Steelers can apparently never win in Cleveland over the last few years. I just think it's funnier, though, because objectively, when you look at it in the history of the Steelers' history, it's very much the same way when Cleveland goes to Pittsburgh. And let me find it here, because it is stark. It is stark realizing that, let's see. Trying to find it here. So, if we look at it from 2023, the Pittsburgh Steelers in the regular season have won 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, 19, 20. They have won 21 of 22, 22 of 23, 23 of 24, 24 of 25. 24 in the last 25 home games outside of the playoffs, which is probably a big one that they want to get back. The Pittsburgh Steelers have won 24 of the last 25 home games against the Cleveland Browns. And I just feel, again, that's just the stat you have to go with there. Again, the Browns, they pulled... You had the full Jameis. I know it was the phrase in shows, or you got the full Monty. I felt like yesterday when you watched the Broncos Browns game, you got the full Jameis. You got everything that you love and you hate about Jameis. The man is a cannon, throwing it all over the yard. Had about 500 yards passing and 4 touchdowns, but he had 3 horrendous picks, including 2 pick sixes. And by the way, Jameis has had a fun year to where, you hear him talk. The problem I have with Jameis, though, is that, in situations like that, he's not a serious person. He's not serious. And in moments like that, he just looks like a clown. He looks like a clown, and he looks like a guy that just doesn't care about context of the situation. You literally cost this team a game in where you had the opportunity to, win a game that you had no business being in. And also, by the way, a fun fact, if I remember, he said that he does not start his career with pick sixes. By the way, Jameis, your first pass of your career to the immortal muscle hamster Doug Martin, your first pass was a pick six. So yes, this is what you do. This is what you do. You just throw pick sixes. You have an incredible cannon of an arm. You're the guy that had 5,000 yards, but also was the only guy that made the ESPN club actually come to life in the 30 for 30. And it's just been, like, to me, like, just when he said that statement, like, I don't throw pick sixes. Yes, you do. That has basically been your MO your entire career. That when you throw picks, more often than not, you will get pick sixes. And those 2 pick sixes that you threw yesterday were horrible throws, especially that one that cost him the game, threw behind. Again, I will thank him for that, because that's a 6-point cover for me. That covered a 5.5-point spread, and that third one sealed the 5.5-point spread. And if it wasn't for Nick Chubb's speed and Cody Barton being a linebacker, he could have thrown 3 pick sixes, which, would have been round brand for Jameis. And again, but, enough about the Cleveland bashing there. But Pittsburgh, they scored their most points since 2018, 44 points. Russell Wilson threw for the second most yards in his career, had one of the probably the best game he's had in 5 years. And I just think that confidence should get them over to a 2-game lead in the North and a 10-3 season. I think it's going to be crazy, though. They have a brutal 3-game stretch with the Eagles, the Chiefs, and the Ravens in about, I think, 3 games in 11 days. I do not think they're going to stay healthy. I'm not trying to wish that upon them. I think it is an incredibly brutal gauntlet to go through. But in this game, again, could the Cleveland Browns be competitive? Sure. It's Cleveland-Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh is ticked off what happened in the snow. They know that they're healthier now. They're a bit healthier. And the Browns just, again, you're telling me Jameis going into Pittsburgh after what he just did, is he going to be able to rebound and play effectively enough to win? I don't think so. And I think the Steelers get a nice, comfortable win to get to a 10-3 start before they go on their brutal 3-game gauntlet to get into the holiday season. So that's all, like, Pittsburgh here, minus 6.5, and Pittsburgh straight up. The next game, the Las Vegas Raiders to Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa Bay, they're just a better football team. Like, the Raiders, they played admirably against the Chiefs, and you could argue, again, the Raiders watching the snap at the end is so on brand for the Raiders. But, again, like, I'm going to take the Bucs here. The Raiders are one of the worst teams in the league. I would argue they are the worst team in the league because I think Jacksonville will show more fight. And I just think with Tampa, they'll be able to bounce back a bit. I think they'll play more effectively. They'll play better run. They'll be able to run really well. Bucky Irving at a career high in rushing yards. Mike Evans got another touchdown. He's been able to help the offense. And I think Baker should be able to bounce back from kind of a shaky game against a division opponent. He'll be able to throw very well against this very porous Raiders defense. And I think the Bucs, with the Raiders traveling out to the East, bit of a jet lag moment for them. I think the Bucs get a nice, comfortable win and take the NFC South lead in a moment where I did not think they had an opportunity for the South about 5 or 6 weeks ago. But here we are where the Bucs could take the lead for the South 14 weeks in. So that's why Tampa Bay here, minus 7, and Tampa Bay straight up. The next game, the Seattle Seahawks over the Arizona Cardinals. This is a game to where, after what I've seen of Arizona the last couple of weeks, Arizona doesn't have that great of a home field advantage. Arizona played admirably. Chad Ryland's had a, nice year. Trey McBride has had a sensational year. You could argue he's become their Kyler Murray's favorite weapon, and I think that's a bit of a problem due to Marvin Harrison being there, and Marvin Harrison should be by far the biggest and most consistent weapon this Cardinal team uses, but Kyler Murray just chooses not to do it. I guess he never fully learned after week 1 where he said it wasn't his job to get Marvin Harrison the ball. And just watching these two teams, like, there's just a part of me going, Mike McDonald and the Seahawks, with the talent they have, even DK did leave the game with an injury. Hopefully he can play. I think the Seahawks are just a bit of, just in key, close, clutch situations, the Seahawks have shown that their coach has been able to put them in better situations, and Gino's been able to make more plays in clutch spots compared to the Cardinals. The Cardinals over the last couple weeks have had close games to where Kyler Murray's had to have some very clutch moments. And more often than not, over the last couple weeks, Kyler Murray has failed in those moments that have gotten the Cardinals to this 500 position that essentially they could win or they could knock out the Cardinals out of the NFC West with this victory. And I think they will. I like how Seattle's defense has been playing. For the most part, the defensive line has played very well. Their secondary has been sensational with Devon Witherspoon. Their secondary has very good defensive players in it. Sometimes they've had bad moments. But I just think Seattle just fundamentally will be able to, make a few more good plays. Gino's been playing a bit better than Kyler as of late. And I just trust that in a close game like this, you tell me you got Jason Myers, a kicker, or Chad Ryland, I'll take Jason Myers, and I'll trust the Seattle clutch moments compared to Arizona. And in a game that, again, was a 10-point game that turned on a Kobe Bryant pick 6 just 2 weeks ago. just 2 weeks ago. And I feel like in a game like this, very similar situation, I'm going to take Seattle, better coaching staff, more consistent quarterback play. Arizona has not had a great home record for the most part, and I just think Seattle grinds out a clutch game due to the little things that I don't think Arizona will be able to capitalize on. So that's why I like Seattle here plus 2.5, and Seattle straight up. The next game, the Buffalo Bills over the Los Angeles Rams. The Bills are the second best team in the AFC. You could argue the best team in the AFC. They've been rolling. The Rams have just kind of been a mediocre team. They were kind of in a weird dogfight with the Saints for the most part for most of the game. Kyron Williams has actually had a very good year. I think they said he's the only running back that scored all their touchdowns. And that's with Blake Corum and the other running backs they have. And they haven't even had QB sneaks or wide receiver reverses. That's really impressive. And again, the last time they had this game, which was, I believe, in the Super Bowl, well, it was opening night. They got blown out by the Rams then. I think it is very well possible with this offense with the Bills now, especially if Dalton Kincaid and Keon Coleman can, I think Keon Coleman play. If Dalton Kincaid can get back, how Josh Allen's been playing with James Cook having that big 100-yard game, this Bills team can very easily go into a Rams defense again and blow them out, where it's going to be very similar to what happened with the Eagles. Do I think the Rams can be competitive? Sure. But I think with how that offensive line for the Rams has played and just how ineffective Stafford's been, I think the Bills can kind of easily, in an environment where the Rams' home field advantage isn't that great, the Bills' defense has been just significantly better. And just everywhere you look, besides the running games you could argue, and maybe the receivers and Puka and Cooper, when they both have been healthy, the Bills have just been clearly the better football team. And again, I don't think they're out of the division. They still get to play the rest of their division the rest of the way through. And I think the Rams still probably would be my favorite to win the division, because I just trust that Rams team probably out of the makeup out of all the other teams. But I'm taking the Bills here. Just fundamentally better. They're getting Matt Milano back. I don't know if he's going to play, but he's coming off the IR, coming off his torn bicep, which is going to be huge. He's a former All-Pro linebacker. I think, again, the Bills should be able to run through effectively with James Cook and Ray Davis. Keon Coleman. Josh Allen's going to make plays, significant plays with his legs, his feet. And I just think Josh Allen's, this is the best version of the Bills the Sean McDermott team has had. And I don't think the Rams, when they've had moments to play these really good, high-quality teams, they have not answered the bell on a consistent basis. And I don't think they'll be able to answer it again with Buffalo coming into town. So that's all like Buffalo here, minus 4.5. Buffalo straight up. The next game, Chicago Bears over the San Francisco 49ers. This one to me just comes down to injuries. I think the Chicago Bears have played fundamentally solid football for the last 3 weeks against their division opponents. They've lost all 3 of their division games by 7 points. And I just think with San Francisco, they're just too hurt. Like, there's going to come a point to where, like, with Nick Bosa and Trent Williams, to where the Niners are not going to be in playoff contention. And I think Kyle Shanahan just has to tell them, look, you're going to be shut down for the year. We're, at this point, like, just done. We're going to maybe try to get a better draft pick. And I just think for the Bears, like, they're playing, Thomas Brown is playing for a job. And usually what happens when you fire a coach, apparently there was a big, report that was shot down by the player that apparently Jalen Johnson got into a huge shouting match with about how that game ended. But to me, I look at this game and go, I think the Bears have more to play for and have hope. And I just think with the Niners, the injuries are too big and piled up that even with Brock Purdy, who's playing with a bum arm anyway, like, I don't think he can pull this game out. Like, it's important for the Niners because, like, you could argue, if they win this game, they still have a slight chance to beat the, to maybe get in the playoffs. But I don't think that will happen. But I think the Bears, look, they're going to play for Thomas Brown. They're going to play well. But I'm going to take the Bears here. Better defense. I'm going to take the coach firing bump. And I think the Niners are just too hurt. And I think the Bears will get a nice, good win to kind of give Thomas Brown some confidence. And maybe he can get this job full-time afterwards. But that's why I like Chicago here, +4 in Chicago straight up. And then the final 2 games, the Kansas City Chiefs over the Los Angeles Chargers. This one to me just comes down to the Chiefs have been able to win a bunch of close games. And I'm going to be probably one of those few people to believe that the Chiefs can win close games off of skill, not because they have a rabbit foot or a lucky leprechaun thing or any other lucky connotation you want to bring up. Any lucky connotation you want to bring up? I think that the Chiefs will win this game based off of their skill. And the Chargers, for the most part, their defense played sensationally. 4 turnovers, they were the reason they won. But usually in these games, the Chiefs will, usually tend to outplay the Chargers in close moments. Even though I don't think Jim Harbaugh is going to be the reason why, they lose because they're going to be outcoached. I'll just take the Chiefs at home because they're just fundamentally playing better. So, it's going to be a great game, and I'm going to take the Chargers here +4 because the Chiefs, over the last several weeks, have won their games by 2, 3, 4. Like, they've won a lot of, really tight games within that 4-point margin. So I feel comfortable taking the Chargers with the points, but I can't take the Chargers with the win just based off the histories of what both teams have done in big moments. And also, we saw this game earlier in the year. The Chiefs won by 3 points. So that's why I have the comfort of saying at home that the Chargers will put up a fight, but they'll cover within the 4 points. Also, by the way, they won their other 2 road or home division games by 4 points. So that's kind of funny how you could take the 4 points in their 2 division wins and match that up to the 4-point spread here. So that's why I can't see Chiefs here straight up with the Los Angeles Chargers +4. And lastly, the Cincinnati Bengals over the Dallas Cowboys. This is an offensive, maybe shootout type game. The Cowboys have been brutal at home outside of the Giants game when they only won by 7. The Bengals defense has been god-awful. But I just think with the Cowboys history and just how bad the Cowboys defense has been, the Bengals should be able to win this shootout at least by 7. Could the Bengals lose? Yes, because their defense has been god awful. They have had they score 28 points a game in losses, but they also give up like 34. So it's like you could argue the Cowboys with that offense with Rico and all that, they could move the football, and there is precedent. Cooper Rush in his in week 2 of 2021, these 2 quarterbacks actually played each other in Dallas before. Cooper Rush won that football game. People may forget about that. Cooper Rush actually does have a win over Joe Burrow. To me, look, for the Bengals, this season's over. Even if they win out, 9-8 is probably not going to get them in the playoffs. But in this kind of moment, when you watch both of these teams, the Bengals' offense has just been too dynamic, and I think that they can, even if they get into a shootout with the Cowboys, which I think is what the Cowboys are going to need to win, I just think I'm going to take Joe Burrow and his talent compared to Cooper Rush and his. If it was Dak, I might take the Cowboys to win because I can see the Bengals choking that game. But Joe Burrow, understanding what happened a few years ago, I would take that as motivation. The Bengals just have more talent around them. And I just think the Bengals have just been a better team for the most part, even through the close losses. The Cowboys have been blown out consistently. The Bengals have been in choke mode the whole year. And if you're taking 2 bad teams, one in choke mode, one in blowout mode, I'm going to take the choking team because at least I know the Bengals can get in those situations to win. The Cowboys, I don't know if they can. And so that's why Cincinnati are -5.5 and Cincinnati straight up. So those are my picks for this week. Like, comment, rate, and subscribe. Please check out the NFL YouTube Prognosticators page to see a bunch of the other prognosticators make their predictions. They're great, just like I am, at giving out predictions and their analysis. And I will be doing my next video next Tuesday as well. But until then, everyone, good luck to all players, coaches, teams, fellow fantasy players, and fellow prognosticators. And until next week, this is Matthew Fanatic signing off. Until then, everyone, so long.